Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the meeting of the Curriculum and Student Success Committee of the Portland Board of Public Education to order at exactly 7:30 on October 27th, 2025. We are meeting in a Zoom mode. I am Julianne Opperman, Chair of the committee, and I have Dr. Maya Lena, who is also a member of the committee, and we will be waiting again for, I guess, are you representing Zach Lee, Mrs. Lee, Teresa?
Uh, no, I'm the new director of secondary ESOL, so I'll be making an update on our multilingual learners along with, I think, Carlos Gomez.
Okay, well, then I think you can report back to Board Representative Lee about the meeting. So thank you very much. Dr. Atkinson-Duino, would you introduce your team, please?
Yes, thanks for having us. I'm Angela Atkinson-Duino, the Assistant Superintendent for Elementary Schools. And from the staff tonight, we have with us Teresa Lee, who is our new Secondary Director of ESOL, and also mom to one of our student representatives, as you were hearing earlier. And then I'm just going to turn it over and let Jesse go ahead, and then we can just rotate and introduce ourselves. Jesse, you want to, yeah.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jesse Applegate. I'm the Senior Director for Special Education and Student Support.
And Haley?
Hi, I'm Haley Didrikson, Senior Director of Data and Technology.
And Tisha?
Hi, Tisha McCarthy. I'm the Director of Specialized Programs.
And I expect that we'll have additional staff joining us for their sections of the presentation a little bit later. Did you want me to go ahead and start sharing the presentation, Julianne? I think that's, here we go.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, please. Would you lead it, or would you like me to?
Well, yeah, I can go ahead and get us started. I just want to.
I will check to see if there's anyone who wishes to make public comment, though I see there are 2 attendees. And if you do want to make public comment, would you please raise your Zoom hand? I don't see that, so we will close public comment. Thank you very much.
Okay. Today we have with us from our, let's see if this is, we have 2 updates, well, 3 updates to provide. First on 2.5, the special education update with data. We'll also provide an update on strategic initiative 2.6, which focuses on our multilingual program. And then also we have an update on middle school enrollment and success and along there. I'm going to turn it over to Jesse and Tisha for this part.
Great, thanks, Angela. Okay, well, it's good to be with everyone tonight. So I am excited to go through with you an update on our special education work in the district. We're going to start with some information about kind of where we are in terms of the student population and staffing, and then we're going to shift to our progress on our strategic plan initiative as well. So starting off with talking about the current student population in terms of IEPs in the district, noting that we are finishing up our annual child count work. And so these numbers are not quite official, but almost entirely completed, and we'll be submitting that next week. And so those are the numbers that I'm going to share with you tonight. So in terms of just the number of students and the percentage overall of students with IEPs in the district, that number is continuing to increase. So as of October 1st, 2019, we had just over 1,000 students, 1,003 students receiving IEP services. This past October 1st, 2025, we now have 1,220 students receiving IEP services from Portland Public Schools. So that current percentage is 19.25% of the population. And then as an additional note on that, beyond those 1,220 students, we also serve an additional 66 students who are placed in private schools, meaning traditional private schools like Breakwater or Waynfleet. We provide a different kind of service to those students, but we are responsible for them. They're attending those traditional private schools, and we do evaluate them, and we do provide them with what's called an ISP instead of an IEP, an individualized service plan. So that's an additional obligation the district has as well. Go to the next slide. So looking at percentage of students with IEPs, just going to talk a little bit about what that looks like school to school. You can see from this graphic here that it varies quite a bit, from as low as 13 something percent all the way up to close to or just over 25%. And so obviously I'm going to go through another table here that I think will show you some more information, but just to understand there is a wide wide difference between schools. So one reason for that could be the locations of our specialized programs. That's what this table speaks to. So you can see here in this table, we are sharing each school. You can see their total percentage of students with IEPs, and then it also shows you which specialized programs are located at that school and how many students are in those programs. And keeping in mind that, when students are in specialized programs, in some cases, it so happens at the elementary level that they are attending also at their home school, like the program is already at their home school, but in many cases, we do move them to a different school for those. And so that's the point of, it could change those percentages a bit. So you can see here the range that we have among elementary schools, 15% to 25%. And then in the next slide, we are looking at the same thing for secondary. At the secondary level, though, a key difference is that many of our programs, students do not need to leave their school to attend. As of this year, all of our middle and high schools have a Breathe program, and all of our middle and high schools have what's called FA or functional academics, which is, akin to sort of a traditional, maybe self-contained or special class. And so we have that at every secondary school, and students are not moving as much between schools at that level. So the premise is that might not be as much of a factor in those distinctions, but could play a little bit. So that's the school percentages. I think we can go to the next slide here. So then the other things that we look at are how much time students are spending in general education setting. So almost 2/3 of students with IEPs are accessing general education for over 80% of the day in Portland Public Schools right now. You can see on this chart that we have, there's 4 categories, right? So when we say for the premise of this reporting, right, the child count reporting, the terminology is that regular class means students are spending 80% or more of their time in general education. So that's by far the largest number of students, almost 2/3. When we say the resource room, again, for this reporting, resource room refers to any students who are spending 40% to 79% in general education, which is a wide range. That's the second largest group. And then the self-contained setting is covers any student who's spending less than 40% of their time in general education. And then in addition to that, we do have the fourth group of students, and these are students who are placed in mostly special purpose private schools, like day treatment type settings. A few of the students are also placed in a residential facility. These are students with very high needs who cannot be served in general education physically in our schools, and therefore they are not, spending any time accessing general education. Okay, go to the next slide. Thank you. So here we have the disability categories. So there's 13 disability categories that students can qualify under when they to receive an IEP. On the left-hand side, we have the number of students in the district in order from the most to least. So you can see that the most common disability categories are other health impairment, specific learning disability, and then autism. So we think that, these the prevalence of these disability categories in particular really shows you just the continuing need for robust executive functioning and behavioral supports. Other health impairment is a category that can apply to maybe a wide range of students, but often does is the category for students who have various behavioral or executive functioning type needs. And then we have autism as well as a major one. And then on the right-hand side here is just a chart that sort of shows the percentages that you see on the left-hand side. So those are the same information presented two different ways. So those are disability categories. And then we also looked at what we call dual identified students, so students who are identified both with IEPs and also identified as multilingual. The percentage of those students is mostly proportional to the overall student population. And what I mean by that is, if you look on the left-hand side, you can see that the two sides are kind of like, we look at it from both directions. So on the left-hand side, we're looking at special education students and what percentage of special education students are identified also as multilingual. And that number is around 30%. You can see in the dark blue there. On the right-hand side, we're looking at multilingual students and the percentage of multilingual students who are identified as also having an IEP. That's the middle bar there, and that comes to about 20.5%. If you look at the 373 number, that's the total number of dual identified students. So both those percentages are, roughly in line with what we see across the district. So that's why I say it's right now mostly proportional to the overall student population. Okay, great. So that's the student data that we wanted to share. And then we also wanted to share where we are in terms of staffing. I will say this is not in the slide, but I did want to make sure the board was aware that the central special education leadership positions that were either open last year, were not filled last year, or the new ones that were added, the coordinator roles, those have all been filled. So we are fully staffed on our central team, which is great. And the work that team is leading, we will be talking about in the next section here. Looking at staff who are working at schools directly with students, this table shows you where we are with different categories of positions. So for special education ed techs, we continue to have, certainly have a significant number of vacancies right now, or as of pulling this together last week, I should say. We had 24 vacancies out of 180 positions. We are covering the majority of those positions via contracted staff. So staff that we hire, ed techs that we hire from private agencies through a contract to cover those positions. We, in terms of case managers, which is also the teachers, right? Special education teachers, case managers are the same role, they're combined. So we have 77 of those positions in the district. 6 of them are vacant. We have one of them covered by a contract, and the rest are covered by long-term sub situations that we have. Looking at our related services, so occupational therapy and physical therapy are not on this because those are completely hired. We don't cover any vacancies through contract there. But on our speech team, we do have 4 vacancies. On our BCBA team, we have 3, and on our psychologist team, we do have 1. We have been able to cover all of those with, again, with outside contractors. So we are able to provide the services that we need to provide that way. But I would say that speech and psychologist positions in particular are, it is a continual challenge to fill those positions. And so we're contracting to cover the capacity that we need. We anticipate continuing to need to do that. I also want to mention that for all of our related services, that even though we have all of the sort of staff positions either filled or covered, we do need to contract, sort of above and beyond that in order to meet the needs of all students. Those numbers can grow and fluctuate, and they do over the course of the year. And so we are contracting above and beyond the positions as well, not just covering them. So that is another piece of context to know. And then I also finally wanted to note that in addition to the ed tech positions that we spoke about, and covering many of them, we also contract with separate group of agencies who provide what are called BHPs, or behavioral health professionals. This is a sort of specific role that is assigned to work one-to-one with students who have particularly high behavioral needs. It's different in the sense that those positions are billed to main care rather than to the district, but it is still contracting for an outside person who comes in and works with the student almost entirely at one-to-one. We currently have 53 of those positions active in the district, and I think several students awaiting them as well. So that is another large piece of the special ed staffing picture, is these outside BHPs. Okay, great. That's all right. So that is staffing. So now I want to move into an update, or updates, I should say, on our strategic plan work 2.5. So we, after the deep dive into special education that we shared about, I think, at different times last year, we landed on sort of looking at our initiative in terms of 4 different strands of work. So summarize them here, and then we'll go through each one a little bit more detail. So first, we identified, and these are key, I should say that the reason we identified them as key strands of the work is because they were, key areas of need that were identified right through our process, where we worked with and got feedback and insight from staff and families and leaders across the district. So after pulling that all together and synthesizing it, these are the 4 focus areas that we landed on. So professional development, right, was one. Special education staff will regularly engage in meaningful adult learning opportunities. Specialized programming. Specialized programs, classrooms across the district will have consistent structures and practice. The 3rd strand was IEPs and service delivery. IEPs accurately reflecting the students and their needs, the student and their needs, and then have a consistent approach to documenting programs and services, and also that the services in the IEP will be implemented accurately and appropriately. And then the 4th strand is family engagement. Families understanding their child's needs, services, and progress, and being active members of the IEP team. So, moving to professional development. So we have designed a year-long professional development arc for all special education staff. The PD arc includes learning opportunities for role-specific opportunities. So for case managers, for ed techs, for our coordinators, for our related service providers, as well as our mental health professionals, which include social workers and counselors. So there's overlap among those groups for sure in terms of what professional development and training is needed. But role specific as well to make sure they have the knowledge and information that they need to be successful. So another note on this is that recognizing that effective PD requires ongoing follow-up and coaching, we are also implementing some new structures. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the specialized programs walkthroughs in a bit, but the premise of that is to engage with teams about sort of the key pieces of the programming and support them in getting that into place. We are beginning a process of regular IEP data reviews with our new program manager position, which I will also talk about in just a little bit here. We're able to regularly look at that data, provide feedback to school teams, and as well as monitor, what it's telling us. So those are some structures that we're now able to put into place with our increased capacity at the central level. And then also wanted to note that tying into professional development as well is the premise of robust guidance for teams on the variety of issues that they encounter working with families and kids in special education. So we're compiling and updating the existing guidance that we have for staff, and in some cases expanding it or adding new pieces to capture the wide variety of processes and best practices related to their work. So that's professional development. And then just sharing a little bit here about, as I spoke to earlier, right, that the ARC is differentiated when appropriate by role, program assignment, or grade span. So not just role, but also some other ways as well. So here are just some examples of what we're providing PD on this year. So for ed techs, behavior intervention plans, implementing accommodations from the IEP. For case managers, topics like IEP progress reporting and transition planning. And then for our specialized program staff specifically, some of the things we're working with them on are differentiating and modifying curriculum for students, as well as learning more about complex and co-occurring disabilities that are more commonly seen in their programs. And then I also just wanted to add that we've, at this point, using the CPI program, we have now established a team at each school that is trained in physical management. It connects also to our de-escalation work, but a significant piece of feedback from staff was the need for this physical management training. And so we do now have teams at every school through substantial training that happened over the summer and in the fall, including most building leaders are trained as well. So we're continuing to do some more of that training over the course of this year, but at this point the teams are in place. And so we're well organized on that as well. So that's PD. So then moving to the specialized program. So our big push this year is around what we're calling the essential features of these programs. We talked about earlier about establishing consistency among them. So we've established the essential features of each specialized program. We convened a work group over the last spring, I should say, to work on this, to identify what really was sort of the basic pieces of each program. And then using their recommendations, we finalized a vision and essential features for each program that we rolled out last month, the teams. And, just to add that when we talk about essential features, those are sort of, again, the really basic pieces of the program, but basic in a sense of being fundamental to the program. Sorry, Angela, I lost the slide there. Sorry, I'm just pausing to get the slide back in place. Are we able to bring it back up?
Can't hear you, Angela.
I can.
I'm going to try to see if I can get it up.
Okay, thank you.
Never done it before, but we'll see what happens. We're almost done anyway, I think. And I guess I need to request sharing. So, okay.
Julianne, are you able to do it, or I have
I think you're
updated
going
it.
to have to do it. I'm,
Okay.
you know, it seems odd.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks. So I just wanted to, so I think I was just speaking to the premise of the essential features of each program. Being, I think we're back one or two. I think we're back a little bit. That's great, thank you. Okay, so the essential features being sort of the fundamental pieces of what makes each program that program. So a mix of classroom structures that have additional complexity in the context of serving students with high needs, as well as the key services that most or all of the students in that program should be able to access. So that's what we've honed in on for the work this year. And then going to the next slide. The way that we're doing that is that for this year, we're going to focus on supporting the consistent implementation of the essential features. So our specialized programs team, led by Tisha, is currently kicking off a walkthrough process, which is designed to assess the status of the essential features in each program. We'll be completing the first round of walkthroughs by winter break, and then conducting a total of 3 rounds over the course of the year. We're going to collect data to monitor our progress in terms of implementing the features over the course of the year. And also, each walkthrough is going to include a debrief and feedback session with the program team, because the premise of these walkthroughs is to support them in getting these key pieces into place. So we will be monitoring our progress and the implementation on it, but certainly designed in a supportive way to help teams get these things into place, because we believe that having them in place is really going to improve the function of the program and improve outcomes for the students. So that's our focus on specialized programs this year. So in terms of IEP data and services, so right now we are focused on getting structures into place for consistent IEP data practices. That was a big point of feedback from DM Group last year, was not having that consistency. So I referenced, new team members. We have a new program manager, and she is the manager of our acuity system, which is where all the IEPs and therefore all the IEP data are kept. She has been and will continue to be focused on cleaning up existing data as well as establishing new processes to keep it up to date and accurate. I referenced earlier the idea of IEP data reviews. So our leadership team will be reviewing data from the system monthly. I think I said this is sharing findings with the school-based coordinators to ensure that we're addressing anywhere that we don't have that seem to have that accurate or consistent data, and provide support around getting into that place. There's a ton of different data that exists in IEPs, but we're not going to be looking at everything or focusing on everything. But some key points of emphasis for this year, because again, they're sort of the most fundamental and important to understanding, a student's needs, are making sure that acuity and infinite campus match. That's also a reporting function, making sure that the data from acuity is accurately in IC allows us to report correctly on special education. We're looking at referrals and evaluations, and how we track that. And then we're also looking at IEP services. When I say that, what I mean is the literal services that students receive. So data on which services students have, the length of time, the number of times per week or month that they have it, who's providing the service, and where that service is provided, like what setting. Those are all kind of the key pieces of IEP services that last year we identified were just not being accurately, or I should say consistently, documented. And we need to have a way to do that so that we can really look at data across the district and understand student needs on that scale. So that's another point of focus for us. We also have started using our existing elementary scheduling software to not just schedule, like students by class and class scheduling, but also using their feature for individual student schedules. So that allows us to see for each student, what their exact schedule is in terms of their special education services, whether that's specially designed instruction from the teacher, whether that's, related services like speech. And we are starting to get students' individual schedules into the system so that over time we can really also look at, service implementation. Comparing that data to what's on IEPs will allow us to understand where we are with implementing services. So that's the other piece of IEP data. I think we go to the next slide. And then speaking to family engagement. So we at this point have a plan that we believe is going to support meaningful family engagement at both the school and district level. So there's a couple pieces to this. So one is finalizing guidance to school teams on best practices for running accessible IEP meetings, and providing meaningful progress reporting to families. Also directly engaging with families through 3 sessions designed for us to provide updates on the strategic plan and receive feedback. And then also family education. So using the parent university structure, we plan to host 3 sessions during the school year to educate parents on key aspects of special education in the IEP process. So we will certainly share those dates once they're finalized. But again, the idea is both to support school teams in their more, consistent routine engagement with families and how to make some of these processes that can feel challenging or overwhelming for families more accessible, more welcoming, but also to make district staff available to families to share with them both in terms of, again, like learning and education, but also direct information about our strategic plan work, and of course to receive feedback as well. So that's those are all pieces of how we plan to engage with families this year. Okay. And that was everything I had for special education. So thank you.
Quite a bit, quite a bit.
Yes.
Are there any questions from the board?
How much, I just want to check, how much time do you, I just want to make, we have with the two other presentations, do you want to take a little bit of time for questions here, just making sure that we,
Well, I would like to
Time.
make it fresh, when it's fresh in the mind for a few minutes here, maybe 10 minutes to see how many questions we have, and then we can move on. Is that all right? There we go. Mylena?
Thanks so much, Jesse, for that presentation. I have two questions. One was, excuse me, from your very first slide when you talked about the 66 students that are enrolled in private schools that you serve with an ISP.
Yes.
Can you talk about the process with that? Are those students that were formerly enrolled in PPS, or are they just Portland residents that get services?
Absolutely, I can answer that for you. So it's actually, and it's a little bit confusing because it's a very different, when students are being sent to those traditional private schools, the structure for how districts are obligated to serve them actually completely changes. So we are obligated to evaluate and create, if needed, ISPs for any student who attends, I want to make sure I say this right, who attends a private school that is physically located within Portland. So of those 66 students, not all of them live in Portland or have ever, some of them have not ever lived in Portland. It could be a student who lives in Scarborough whose family is sending them to, Breakwater. Our obligation to them is based on the fact that they attend that school, which is physically located in Portland. That's totally different than how, obligations districts have to any other situation, but that's how it works. So we have 66 students. We have a number of private schools, of course, in the physically within Portland. So we evaluate and provide those ISPs to all those students. And that is it's a meaningful resource allocation that we need to have to do that. It does come, I will say, it comes largely from our federal grant money. We are required to spend a certain amount of federal grant money to serve those kids, and that's what we do.
Great. That was my next question about that. Okay. And then one last question was about the physical management training.
Yes.
Is that something that the training, like where it's from or the context of the training, can that be shared publicly? I've had some questions from community members about what that looks like, and I just was wondering if that's accessible to people so they know what those staff members are able to do.
Yeah, I mean, for sure we can. I'm just trying to think of let me just think this through. So the program is called CPI, which stands for Crisis Prevention Institute. It's one of several companies that provides what I would say are overall, similar types of this kind of physical management training. In terms of what staff are learning, I mean, I would have to think maybe a little bit about how we would best communicate that, but it certainly is something that we could share more on. I think it's not, it's something that we're really effectively required to have, because if you are engaging in any kind of restraint, you really need to have folks who are trained in it. So it's not something the district is, every district has folks who are trained in it. We're trying to make sure that everyone feels like they can respond to a situation like that when needed. But I'd be happy to share more information. I guess maybe I'll just want to come back on exactly the best way to do that, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Sure.
just also, anybody, there's plenty of information on the website of the Crisis Prevention Institute. So anybody, that information is all publicly available.
Great.
Absolutely. Thanks, Angela.
Mickey Bondo, what would you like to know?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much, Jesse, for the presentation. I have two questions and two comments. I think for my first one is on the slide 10. Slide 10, yes, slide 10. Yes, the multilingual here. So I have one major question and one sub question is that I'm always a fan of the data collection. So I would just wonder when I study that graph here. So I'm trying to figure out if you have something little more detail on what specific measurable data we have used to collect those IP goals for those multilingual students. And if so, I want to know how often are we collecting those data?
So you said IEP goals?
Yes, for the IP goals
for the
for the
students?
multilinguals, yeah.
Absolutely. So we certainly every student must have IEP goals, updates to the family on the progress toward those IEP goals is entered into the system as part of the process of documenting it and sharing it with families. So we have that data. We're in terms of like collecting it to see how students, like multilingual students specifically, are progressing compared to other students. We haven't done that. We haven't done that yet. But I think progress on IEP goals is certainly data that we want to be, evaluating more in the future. But that we have not yet dug into it systematically. We do have it though, and because it's being entered.
Okay.
into the
So
system.
yeah, I just put a note, so I will have a follow-up that one as soon we getting close to, because I just wonder the way we identify them to be dual, if it's about the fluency rate or about something else. Then I just wonder how often we get those IP goals. Okay, thank you. So we follow up. So my next one is I see then we have like a 38 exceeded the multilingual. So I just wonder, how do we measure the transfer of those students to be exceeded as from the multilingual on the IPs?
Do you mean like how we document it or how we?
No, as you know, for the graph here, you see the exit. They just
Yes.
exit for MLA. You have like a 38
Yes.
being exited from that. So I'm just wondering, how do we measure the transfer of them just to recognize them? They're on the way out.
Well, I think they and let me know if I'm not answering your question. But the students that transfer out, they do that through in the same process that any student would use to no longer be to exit multilingual. So we're not necessarily we're not necessarily like that wouldn't change their status in terms of an IEP necessarily.
Oh, okay.
Right? We're not.
Okay.
It just means that they made it's definitely great news, in terms of the progress that they made, but it doesn't necessarily impact their status. The team would potentially discuss it though.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe I can catch up with Carlos. Yes, thank you, Jess. That's exactly the point I was looking for. If he's what changing the status as an IEP, but it's just changing the way they are not anymore recognized as a multilingual, but they exist to the mainstream IEPs spectrum, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So my last one is on the slide 15. I just need a clarification here. So when we talk about the mix of classroom, the last bullet, the essential feature of the mix of the classroom structure. So that just for the special education, or that one is also included the general teaching aspect, the mix of the classroom. You just so specifically just for the special education, or you can be also in the context of the general education?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think that some of I want to make sure I say this correctly. So I think that some of the supports and structures that we expect to be in place in the program certainly support a student in accessing general education. It could be in general education, but largely when we talk about essential features, we are
Right.
looking more at what's happening in the program,
Okay.
sort of separate from general education. Although it's
Okay.
also true that many students, even in specialized programs, certainly access general education. Some do quite a bit. But in terms of our focus for right now, we're looking more at what the special education team has in place and is doing to support the students. There is definitely overlap, but the focus is more on the special education side.
Yeah, it's really overlapping because if I just want to get myself correctly, I think if I understood correctly earlier, then we mentioned about we have like almost 1/3 of the student IP access in general education for over 80% of the day. That's correct, right?
Almost 2/3 do. Almost 2/3
Okay.
that much, yeah.
Yes, it's 2/3. So that's exactly what I was wondering about the mix of classroom structure, if that one is included, because I just want to understand if the general education teachers or also receiving the PD to try to make sure they can implement also those structure in the classroom setting using like the co-teaching area to make sure it's mostly more inclusive when they're teaching those students coming to the general classes. I don't know if I'm making my sense, but I
Very
just
clear.
want to understand if we have 2/3 of those students with the IPs joining the general education. I just wonder how well our teachers in the general setting have been receiving a PD to be able to accommodate those implementation.
Yeah, and
Yes.
I would say that I think how we support students in general education, whether that's through special ed resources, whether it's through training general education teachers, like you're saying, I think
Yes.
that's an area, I will say, I think that's an area of growth for us. So I think, the access is, that having the number of students accessing is definitely positive as sort of a starting place, but thinking about
Okay.
how do we, really support that access to make it as meaningful as possible. And one way to do that, of course, would be through additional training for general educators. So I think it's an area of growth for us.
It's
It's
an
not
area of
something we've
growth.
been,
Okay.
So
as focused on.
I think we should, I have questions again. I don't know if you have some more, Mickey, but maybe.
No, I'm good. I just have a good recommendation, a good about the slide. This is really, that's why I'm so little sad, and we don't have enough time with so important information and so important areas with special education, multilingual report. This is why we need little more time to go really diving it, because it's so something that I've been supporting for years, and we didn't have a lot of report on the law plan and too many things about this. So this is something I'm so passionate. So I'm going to be stopping there, but I just want to say thank you so much for giving the opportunity for family engagement area, because I really want to see the survey from those parent feedback. And I like the walkthrough process from your slide 16. And I would like to see the result on those results, see how those strategy has been used by the teachers.
It would be good.
Absolutely.
I don't know when we're scheduled again, Jesse, but it might be, a good to touch base just briefly with you at some point in the future. Speaking of multilingual, we have all, which includes some, we have people who want to speak about that. So would you like to continue? And who's leading this?
We have
entry?
Carlos and Teresa.
Okay, awesome.
Hi, I'm Teresa Lee, the Director of Secondary ESOL, and I'll be presenting along with Carlos Gomez, the Director of Elementary ESOL.
Good to see you all, and I think we're going to go kind of exchange back and forth here. I think Teresa has the first couple of slides, but it's good to see you all, and thank you for being here.
So this evening, we're going to reconnect with the PPS LAO plan. We're going to report on the Strategic Plan Initiative 2.6, also known as the Center for Applied Linguistics audit of our ESOL program and Spanish immersion. And we're going to review outcomes for our multilingual learners and talk about next steps. So for our multilingual programming, it all begins with the LAU plan. That's the legal foundation and the blueprint for English language development in Portland Public Schools. English language development is a civil right. Portland Public Schools regards multilingualism as an asset, and we believe that we all are responsible for both the academic achievement and the English language development for our MLs. The LAU plan gives all educators the guidance to know who our MLs are, how to identify their needs and strengths, and provide the right level of resources. If we zoom into section 11 of the LAU plan, what we see are the goals and measures that we use to evaluate our program. The gold standard is the annual scale score growth target that's issued by the Maine Department of Education. We also look at the number of MLs meeting English proficiency in a given year. Our goal is 10% or more. We also look to see that MLs meet the Portland Public District representation for Chapter 104 and in honors AP courses. And right now that percentage would be about 23%. We're focused on reducing the achievement gap by 5% for students who exit our program. They exit via the access test, which is given annually, and they need to achieve a 4.5 on that test to be exited. So I know there was a question about that before. And we're looking to see that those exited students don't have as much of a gap of their achievement compared to students who have never been MLs. And we're trying to reduce that gap by 5%. We're also looking at reducing the number of MLs with chronic absence or disciplinary referrals. And then there's school-specific measures. Some schools have a goal in their school success plan of having more growth in one specific language domain, perhaps speaking or writing, something like that.
And, as Teresa just shared, and as many of you know, sort of the LAU plan is our context and that roadmap for our service to our multilingual learners. But we also have our strategic plan, and there's a specific initiative in there, 2.6, that essentially talks about the strategies that we're using in all of our classrooms to support multilingual learners in accessing grade level content. So that broadly is how that initiative is worded. And this particular strategic plan initiative is in the design phase this current school year. So similar to where the student support services and special education went through their design and review and audit last year, that's sort of where we are with our multilingual and ESOL programming. We have contracted with the Center for Applied Linguistics, who is currently this fall conducting that program review for our ESOL and Spanish immersion programming. And the goal of that review is to share with you all and the school board and the superintendent and all of us the strengths, areas of improvement, and any recommendations that we have. So we're expecting that by February, in a few months, that we will have the results of that review. On the next slide, here are a couple of items that we are either currently or have recently completed or that were completed earlier in the summer. We had a process to create a request for proposal, which happened in July. we organized a selection committee that met in August with some criteria. That committee selected the Center for Applied Linguistics, an organization that has been doing this for decades. And in fact, about 10, 11 years ago, they came to Portland and did a program review. We entered into a contract with them that was established in early September, once the school year was underway. We are in the process of closing out a data use agreement. So our data team and our attorneys are looking at how Center for Applied Linguistics will handle and use our data. And they will take the next couple of months to review all the items that we share with them. And then this past week, we coordinated classroom visits and staff focus groups and some student focus groups at 6 of our schools, sort of a representative sample of 3 elementary schools. Those were Talbot, Reike, and Lyseth. 2 of our middle schools, Lyman Moore and King, and Portland High School. So they just completed a busy week. They sent 3 representatives to conduct these site visits. On the next slide, you'll see what are some items and action steps that remain. We will have several more focus groups that will be held virtually. These will include focus groups for district leaders, for building leaders, for families, multilingual families, and families that are participating in our language programming. The data review, as I mentioned, will happen over the next few months. They'll be taking a closer look at all of our main through year scores from the last few years since COVID. They'll be looking at access scores as well as disciplinary and behavioral data. Basically, a lot of the data that you saw in section 11 of our LAU plan evaluation program. And then, as you mentioned, we'll come again in front of the school board to present their findings and their recommendations as we move forward. So even though this is a design phase, on the next slide, you'll see that we are still actively supporting. We're not sort of stopping or discontinuing anything that we're doing. In fact, we are committing to research-based and other strategies that are helping our multilingual learners develop. A reminder to you all that in June of 2023, you passed a school board resolution that held multilingual learners at the center, encouraging as many of our staff as possible to be credentialed in working with and teaching multilingual learners. So that is something that we've continued to build out over the last few years. There has been some change in our central office structures and our district leadership, but that work continues. And that, in fact, is embedded in a lot of the other initiatives that are happening, special sort of call out to initiatives around academic achievement. So we're working closely with our elementary and middle schools to support the Tier 1 curriculum and scaffolding for multilingual learners. We also have used the research-based strategy of SIOP, or Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol, to help get as many of our instructional coaches and other instructional leaders trained in this protocol. That's really useful with any and all curriculum form, helping multilingual learners access that and develop language and have language at the forefront of that process. We have continued to work every year for the last 2 or 3 years in training our new teachers to Portland schools with elevation strategies, which is sort of a PSYOP asynchronous model that we use in the classroom. So teachers are actually using these strategies in the classroom and coming together as a small professional learning community to reflect on how they would use those in the future. We have had several PLBSS courses around foundations for teaching multilingual learners. We've had many of our staff become language learners themselves as they study Spanish and Portuguese. We've had several sessions for dozens of our classroom teachers and ed techs so that they can experience what it's like to learn a language and to equip them with some tools that they can readily use with their students and their families. And we also have this year our human resources team that's come on to help create a cohort to try and get more of our teachers with the full 660 endorsement. So lots of things are still happening in addition to this design phase. And I think Teresa will tell us a little bit about what those look like.
So we're going to take a look at some of the ways we review outcomes for our multilingual learners. As you know, we always have our annual Access Data Retreat. Another thing we do is we take a look at those main through year reading results, reading being a key language domain for academic success. And we'll be showing you the 3-year trend in the main through year assessment for our multilingual learners that's looking encouraging for sure. And then I believe Carlos will take up the mission measure of meeting target growth on access and talking about the Maine Department of Education multilingual dashboard. So if you take a look at these results for the Maine through year test, this test was given in the spring of 2025. All multilingual learners who have been in U.S. schools for at least 1 year take this test, along with, of course, our non-multilingual students. And last year, about 75% of non-ML students were at or above state expectations for reading. About 35% of multilingual students were at or above state expectations for reading. The gap there is about 40 percentage points. Our goal is to close that gap as much as we can. And so another way to say that is to help students acquire the academic language they need to read on grade level as soon as possible. So in this chart, you'll see that multilingual learners are featured right in the middle there. And you'll see that we're seeing a trend that looks promising from spring of 2023 to spring of 2025. We've seen a 4.34% increase in reading scores of multilingual learners, closing the gap a little bit tighter. And of course, you can also see data from economically disadvantaged students and students with IEPs as well. So for multilingual learners and students with IEPs, you see that the difference is colored in green. That means we're closing the gap. It looks like for economically disadvantaged students, that gap seems to still be widening a little bit, and I'm sure we're all taking a look at that as well.
And then we've talked a lot about access data scores, and our mission measures. One of the main indicators that we're looking at for our multilingual learners is how many of our students are meeting their target growth measures on that access test. That's an elusive number in some ways to calculate, because the state calculates that based on the number of years, the proficiency level, the grade level, it is something that we have been working with our own data team to try and recreate. And we're getting closer and closer, but ultimately the Maine Department of Education sort of shares with us what if our students have made those target growth measures. And just as a reminder, the access test is taken starting in kindergarten through 12th grade. It's taken in January or February, so right at the beginning of the school year. Those scores come back in May, and then we may not get those growth target measures until late fall. So it's almost a full year before we get those scores. And then a month later, students are taking the access test again, and that cycle kind of restarts. So, so as of right now, we have set a target of the 2% growth per year on access, and that is that's not to say that students are not making growth. The vast majority of our students are making growth, but that is something that we're continuously trying to monitor and account for and calculate as students move in and out of our programming. And then the last slide, I think, will there's a link there around the Maine Department of Education's dashboard. If Angela, if we can move just to the next slide, that dashboard gives us at the state level a sense of the number of multilingual learners that are enrolled in our districts across the state. As you know, Portland has about a quarter of our multilingual learners in the whole state. And it breaks down information further by grade level, by proficiency level, by race and ethnicity, home languages, and other data. So that's something that, again, there's a lag on that, about a year or so. But we've been between our platform Elevation and our data team, we have been trying to continue to monitor closely those target growth measures. And then I guess the last slide just talks a little bit about where we go from here. Just a reminder that we'll hear the recommendations from our program review later in the fall. So that will help guide our direction in the next couple of years as we move out of the design phase of Initiative 2.6 and into an implementation phase. We'll continue to scaffold instruction of core curriculum for our multilingual learners. We'll continue to monitor how that scaffolding is working through our walkthroughs. And we will monitor the achievement and language progress. We will continue to offer more opportunities for educators to get the 660 endorsement, or gain the knowledge that that endorsement can have for our instruction. And then ultimately we may want to get to a point where we're considering how our ESOL and Spanish immersion models can accelerate learning for multilingual learners. That might include, more co-teaching models, a dual language immersion model, perhaps ESOL coaching. But again, we want to make sure that we have the full picture from our program review as we make those next step decisions. So that is, I think, the end of our section here. And yeah.
Thank you very much. We do have another section to go. However, we meet again next week and so if we do not, we are not unable to talk about the middle school information until next week. That's possible but we'll see what we can do. We have 20 more minutes left, and we will let Mickey start and then Maya continue. Please.
Thank you so much, Chair. I have 1,000 of questions, but I'm just going to wait until February when the next presentation will come. So I will go with just one to the respect of the time. So when I look at, thank you, Carlos, and good to see you again, and Teresa. My concern is on the language proficiency growth. When I heard both of you, I see a lot of reading aspect of that. But I know for sure, but being in that same setting and doing that one for my kids for a year, you should have at least those 4 language domains on the listening, writing, and speaking. So I'm just wondering on what extent are we consider the other domains in our proficiency growth? So this is only the main question I have now. The other 99, I will keep it for February. So that's my question. Thank you.
I can thank you, Mickey. Right, so reading, writing, listening, and speaking are all taken into the composite growth calculation. Reading and writing is 70%, listening and speaking is 30% of that composite score. So they're all considered, but they're weighted differently. And yeah, essentially.
Okay, so can we next time I want to see the achievement gap between the English learners and the no-English learners, if you don't mind. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Ms. Lena?
Yes, thank you. I think this question would be for Carlos. I am curious specifically about the Chapter 104 identification for multilingual learners. And the reason I'm asking is the policy committee is soon going to be looking at the Chapter 104 policy and just, how it works in Portland. And I wanted to know if there was anything specific you could share about how we are supporting multilingual learners to get recommended for screening.
So thank you for the question, and Teresa, feel free to jump in as well. I think when we redid the Lao plan in 2020 to 2022, we looked at how we are identifying multilingual learners for gifted and talented programming for honors courses at the secondary level or AP courses. And one of the things that we added was for students who made much higher accelerated growth in their English language development. So we considered that as one of the indicators that we would use to help identify students for Chapter 104.
If I can ask a follow-up question to that, what if their 104 status might be more in the mathematics aspect of it? How does that work in the language? I mean, I appreciate the fact that what Mickey brought up is that there are multifacets to people learning and being able to communicate in a language, and just from, it's a concern. Go ahead. Math-wise. It isn't part of it, the part?
So I would think for math, a big part of the screening is looking at those main through year tests and seeing how students are doing. And so prior to taking this position, I was an ESOL teacher at Presumpscot School and in other elementary schools for many years. And so one thing that we started to do along the way is to take a look at those main through year scores through the lens of really looking at the students who are above grade level and looking at their whole profile and keeping in mind whether they're learning English and so on, and maybe casting a little bit of a wider net for further testing for Chapter 104. Does that sound about right to you, Carlos?
Yeah, that does. And we have math coaches. I may not have the correct title on that. Several of them were former ESOL teachers or have been working on their 660 endorsement. So, to go back to the board resolution from a few years ago, having some of our key educators knowledgeable in language development as well as their content area can help with identifying students for Chapter 104.
Okay, thank you. I do think we have a few minutes to at least get a beginning look at what's going on in middle schools.
Great. Well, maybe it'll
Sorry,
be
Hallie, for such a short.
Oh, no, it's okay. I think I can keep it short and sweet too, because some of this is really just revisiting some of the pieces that I shared at our last meeting and providing a little bit deeper dive into the data. And so this first slide, just this is a revisiting. Some of the numbers are slightly different this time from the last time, because as I think I mentioned when we last looked at these numbers, our current enrollment numbers are still in flux. We will be certifying our enrollment, our October 1st enrollment counts this week. And so that's when we consider having sort of a more static number that we typically report on. So there's an asterisk on this, which is this number could change again between now and the end of this week. But as we see, there is over the last 5 years been a decline in our middle school enrollment numbers. So if we can go to the next slide. Again, these should be familiar from our last review, but so just to kind of remind folks, overall trend data, of course, we see this declining enrollment overall, and then where we see the largest enrollment decline is at Lincoln Middle School, and with the sort of adjusted numbers, with our latest enrollment counts, we see a 23% decrease over time. I'll go along to the next slide. So this is where, I want to go a little bit deeper into the data. And so when we look at specific subgroups of populations, we do see some additional patterns emerging. So the first thing to note here is as we look at sort of the overall multilingual student enrollment counts over time, it's a slightly different trend than what we've seen in the overall enrollment. So first, what's noticeable is that King Middle School has seen a sizable increase in multilingual student enrollment counts over time, whereas Lincoln Middle School has seen a much more substantial decrease. And so when you actually look at multilingual students and the total counts in our district, there's actually been an overall about 7.5% increase over the same period of time. So a really different enrollment trend when we actually look at that subpopulation. And so I wanted to sort of investigate a little bit deeper about what's happening, what's potentially driving some of the trends we're seeing. And so trying to test some possible hypotheses about sort of why are the numbers that we're seeing happening. So, when we look at, for example, the multilingual enrollment trends, we can see that perhaps in Lincoln's case, right, one of the reasons that the enrollment counts are declining is simply because a certain subpopulation that has been increasing in the district is actually decreasing in that particular school, and that can be impacted by boundaries and where people live and where different students get placed when they come to the district. But when we look at the actual exit codes that are attached, so when a student exits our district, we do use a state mandated exit code that is attached to the student that tells us why are they leaving Portland Public Schools. And so when we look at the sort of overall exit rate, so the number of students who are exiting each year, I did provide this for the last 3 years, and we can see that there's not a ton of variation happening when you look at different grade levels. So the way we would interpret this graph is, looking, for example, at 4th grade students compared to 5th grade students, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade students. It's a relatively flat line with some small spikes in it. There's a little bit of variation, but in the world of data, some small variation can just be due to chance and not really driven by something causal. So generally, when I look at this line, I see generally a pretty flat line with small variation. We do see some slight upticks in the 5th and 8th grade years. And so, one thing that we could hypothesize here in looking at this is that these are natural points of transition in a child's educational journey. At the end of 5th grade, they are moving into middle school. At the end of 8th grade, they're moving into high school. And so if families are considering moving their child into a private or homeschool or charter school, that those would be points in time that might logically occur. And so what I want to name is just, so I had my colleague Matt and I sort of really dug into the exit codes to really understand sort of why are students exiting. So again, we see some declining enrollment. But I will say that the most frequent reason across grades and across years that students are leaving Portland Public Schools is to just attend another school in a different district in Maine. And again, we can hypothesize about why that might be, but certainly, one plausible explanation could be that being priced out of Portland has driven families to move to other surrounding communities. And so perhaps not surprising to see that as the most frequent reason. Obviously, we would have to test that hypothesis to sort of talk to people, but that could be one potential explanation. And then when we actually drill down and in the board docs that we provided for this meeting, I did sort of provide a full breakdown of all the counts by exit code. But really, we do see a fair amount of variation, and they're relatively small n's for why students are exiting. So, it could be because students are moving out of state or out of the country. But we did also see in some cases that enrolling in private school is another common reason to exit. Okay, so, and again, I should say, like all of these, and I think if you look at the detailed chart, our ends are still pretty small. So when we talk about students who are transferring, for example, to private, charter, or homeschooling, these are all still relatively small ends. But again, when we think about things that are sort of potentially within the sphere of control of the district or things to be attentive to about why it might be important to investigate this, just looking at the sort of trend line here among the exit rates among students who exited, those who exited for one of these 3 exit codes. And so the only trend that really emerges here is a slight spike in the 8th grade year, which again, probably not totally surprising if you think about the end of 8th grade being sort of a logical point at which a family might choose to enroll their child in a private charter or homeschooling circumstance. So that is sort of the one trend that kind of jumped out in the exit codes, but I will say that sort of across other grades, you're not seeing quite the same trend line. And again, there's variation and it varies by year, but they're still relatively small ends because, of course, the most frequent reason for exiting is just moving to another district in Maine. So that gives us a little deeper dive into those data. And I think that sort of the parting thought there is that, you know, these trend lines give us some indication of maybe why enrollments are fluctuating, but certainly talking to stakeholders can be another source of data that can help us understand the why behind the trends we see. And it gives us a little bit of indication, but there's probably a deeper dive that would be helpful to really understand what's going on.
Thank you, Haley. It's a lot of diving already, so appreciate you looking at it and to see what's going on. And Mickey, would you have a question for her?
Yes, just a quick question. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Hailey. Thank you. This is really good and really important. Just a quick question about some of the exit codes, because I really understand about moving to different areas of some alternative education settings. So that can make sense. So do you think maybe when I'm thinking about dropped out, maybe it's more likely to happen in middle school? So do you see any exit code with a life factor like a truancy or dropped out can be some reason adding to those decline of the enrollment or not?
That is a really good question. I would have to check and see how the enrollment record is coded. You know, we pulled specifically the exit codes, which means we sort of formally ended the enrollment. And with dropouts, sometimes a student can sort of exist in our enrollment records and not be formally exited. So I would have to look into that one, but it's a good question.
Okay, thank you, Ali. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Well, thank you, Haley, for being so brief. I'll put your graphs into the notes for the meeting. And I was going to put with them the results on the academic measurements that parallel those trends. The one thing that might be interesting to see is those that leave to a district, if there's any change in leaving and the level of economic distribution in the student population will be another one, because who can afford to move and how. And so, but anyway, I want to thank everyone, all of the presenters, for your details. I mean, as Mickey, Vice Chair Bondo said, she loves data and likes to see the real meat of it, and I do too. And
Amazing.
Yes, indeed. So please, we appreciate it. Look for more of it. Anytime you've got anything good, don't hesitate to send it to us in between meetings as well, particularly some of the questions that Mickey brought up. So anything, anyone want to say anything else before we go? Then I look for a motion to adjourn.
I move the motion.
There's Maya, got it? All right,
Yes.
so we shall say adieu and see you tomorrow night, guys.
Right. Thank you, everyone. Great
Thank you.
presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.